Eric, what's your take on what's happening at the convention?
Well, I think what we're seeing here is a party and a group of people who are quickly unifying behind their nominee, Donald Trump. And it looks like this is going to be a party that is going to be unified and together as it heads into these last 3.5 months of this campaign, which is soon becoming a sprint rather than a marathon. And what we're seeing right now is a party that's unifying versus a party that's splintering.
What do you make of J.D. Vance? Many of us becoming acquainted with him for the first time, although I believe his book is also even on TV. You can watch Hillbilly Elegies on Netflix as a film that's been made of it as well. But this is a man who's all about detail. Perhaps that would be hugely complementary to Trump, who's more sort of broad picture, but not necessarily one to focus in on the minutiae. But those concerns about Ukraine, those comments he made about Ukraine, and then we hear Boris Johnson saying he has no doubt that Trump will support the country. Who are we to believe?
Well, I think J.D. Vance he's obviously a political novice, having only been in office for less than 2 years. He's a political lightweight. I don't think, as many people suggest, that he perhaps is a legacy to Donald Trump or MAGA. And I do believe that given his baggage, particularly on issues of women's reproductive health and abortion, I think he's going to be a lightning rod for the Democratic Party with much fodder that they can use both against him as well as the party on their signature issue of abortion that Democrats, I should say, have been very successful at.
This awful shooting incident at the weekend, the assassination attempt. Do we look back at this now, Eric, and say this is when Trump won the election? He dodged the bullet, but won the election.
No, not at all. Because we know in the United States, Donald Trump has been someone who has created a culture of violence and polarization. And so Donald Trump himself is ground zero with his mocking of the attack on the former speaker's husband, for calling for violence against demonstrators and protesters. And of course, we know what took place on January 6th. And so what we're seeing here is now this violence, this polarization that has been one of the key characteristics of MAGA is now coming full circle. And also, too, Donald Trump being the polarizing figure that he is, I don't think we're going to see it endear him to many voters. I think what we're seeing here is because the polarization in the United States is so stark. I think what you're seeing is people simply moving into their respective camps. And again, as the polls continue to show, this is still a toss-up race with more than 3 months to go.
Now, that's interesting because there's been so much commentary saying that this has won the election for him. But I suppose that's based on the idea that there are these people who are wavering or wobbling Trump supporters, but they don't really exist, do they, Eric? You're either in camp Trump or not. You don't think that those people who weren't sure about him are now going to vote for him as a result of what happened at the weekend?
I think there are people who simply who don't like either of these candidates, but who know who both of them are. And I don't think the attempted assassination is going to create sympathy for Donald Trump. What it does is create empathy, because as we know, in the United States, the issue of guns and mass shootings has been something that has been an epidemic in this nation. So there are many people who can certainly empathize with Donald Trump, but that doesn't mean that's going to move them to actually vote for him.
What about empathy for Joe Biden? How has he come through this whole incident? Sometimes, people do worry about him stringing sentences together. He seemed very together in the aftermath of what happened to Donald Trump. What's your take, and how's he faring?
Well, I think there are going to be issues of age and fitness that will dog him now through the election. We are seeing the number of congressional Democrats and elite donors continuing to call for him to step aside. He continues to say that he is in this race, but clearly what we're seeing here is a schism and a great divide growing within his party. And it seems as though Joe Biden is paralyzed to be able to actually do something about it. And so the question becomes, can he put this back together before their nominating convention, or is this something that's going to continue to be an issue for him heading into the election?
It's so interesting to us over here because, of course, we've seen prime ministers forced out of office as, you know, they've lost the confidence of their cabinet. And that just isn't an option over in the States with the president, is it? And that seems quite alarming to us. What of these reports? I mean, we've seen the celebrities like Michael Douglas and George Clooney pulling their support. But what about the rumours that Nancy Pelosi, of course, an incredibly powerful Democrat, and Barack Obama, who he was vice president for when he won 2 terms as president, are behind the scenes trying quietly to persuade Biden to step aside? Have you heard those rumors?
Oh, absolutely. We're hearing every day about Nancy Pelosi actually taking calls from congressional Democrats, and she's taking notes and she's taking temperature of the room to see what's happening. But there's also an actual caucus chair of House Democrats, Hakeem Jeffries, and of course, he continues to stand with Joe Biden. But we also know the rank and file of the party. So you've got the elites, the congressional Democrats and the donors on one side, and then you have the rank and file, the actual voters on the other. And I think that's where the divide is. The question is going to be who actually is going to win this brewing civil war within the Democratic Party, which of course is the worst time for this to be happening, as the party needs to be unifying against the Republicans.